For the next 650 years, the Altmer experienced relative peace, not counting the usual Mortimer piracy, slowed skirmishes and political squabbles. It cannot be said with full certainty how the Summerset Isles became part of the Second Empire, but I suppose the Altmer were in no position to wage a full-scale war with all races of men, as Remen has conquered all of Cyrodiil, High Rock, Skyrim and Hammerfell. Perhaps they have agreed to become vassals to the Empire, but were allowed to keep autonomy, and so keep their borders closed as long as they paid the tithe. At the Coral Tower, it seemed the Slowed menace was eliminated forever, and while they have not recovered their strength to stage another atrocity of the Thracian plague proportions, they were relentless and hateful towards the Altmer. Eventually, a 6-year-long war of the Ulchivi broke out between the two races. The conflict was bitter, but in the end, the goat-skinned Mer prevailed and drove back their assailants. 3 years later, the First Era ended, and new struggles and accomplishments awaited the High Elves. In the year 230th of the Second Era, Vanus Galerion, a renowned practitioner of the arcane, established the first Mages Guildhall in Firsthold. From there, the guild spread across nearly all of Tamriel and grew into the respected institution we all remember it to be. He also created the Order of the Lamp. Their members, known as Lamp Knights, are defenders and protectors of the guild halls. Vanus Galerion later becomes a Mer of Legends in his struggles to thwart necromancy. Another important figure is born in 555th year of Second Era, Irene. Like all her predecessors, she was educated in the College of Sapiarchs, but being an adventurous young lass, she ran away, and for 7 years her fate remained unknown. In her absence, her younger brother Naaman was next in the line of succession, but with their father's death, she returned to claim her reign. Apparently, during her time away, she traveled across Tamriel, and when she took the throne, she knew of the many threats to the Altmer people she swore to protect. In the north, the civil unrest of Bretons led to formation of Daggerfall Covenant, later joined by the Orcs of Orsinium and Redguards of Hammerfell. In the east, the denizens of Akavir have invaded for the second time. Calling for temporary truce, the Nords, Dunmer and Argonians banded together to defeat the invaders. In the fires of battle, the Ebonheart Pact was forged. Irene's answer to that was the formation of Aldmeri Dominion. The Bosmer of Valenwood faced their own religious strife, and Khajiit of Elsewhere faced the resurgence of the dragons in their land, both being in dire need for allies. Together, they joined the race for the Ruby Throne. The contest for the seat of power of Tamriel began in 430th year of the Second Era, with the assassination of the Akaviri potentate, Savirian Chorak. The time when various powers did their best to gain an upper hand lasted for 424 years until the end of Second Era. This period of time is called Interregnum, in between the reigns. In the year 578 of the Second Era, the Soul Burst occurred, sowing seeds of disarray and chaos. The veil between Oblivion and Mundus torn, and Molag Bal attempted to dominate all life. With this new danger looming over, the skirmishes of the three alliances intensified as each faction attempted to gain land resources and control. 1 year later, in 579, the War of Three Banners broke out. During this war, Aldmeri Dominion attempted to sever the Argonian connection to the Hist and infiltrated Shadowfen. While they used subterfuge in Black Marsh, they used brute force in Glanumbra and Alikur Desert where they invaded. Simultaneously, the Redguards and Bretons invaded Ordon. It was in the year 582 of the Second Era, during the Alliance War, that the vile Slowed have conceived a plan to bring the Summerset Isle into their domain. Slowed of Abyssal Cabal have pooled their efforts together with the Triad, Nocturnal, Clavicus Vile, and Mephala. These princes were fulfilling their own pursuit of power and the Sload have offered to steal the stone of Crystal Tower, the heart of transparent law, in exchange for the Altmeri archipelago. The Sload manipulated the leader of the Sijic order to take the stone, but Nocturnal betrayed the other two princes and took it for herself, hoping to use it to absorb all life from Mundus and perhaps even Oblivion and Aetherius. This would bolster her power, making her the supreme god, most powerful of them all. Her plans, however, were foiled by the combined effort of Mephala, Clavicus, and Vestige. Regardless of their efforts, no one managed to seize the Ruby Throne until 854 of the Second Era. But by that time, all three alliances dissolved due to infighting, and the provinces of Tamriel have reasserted their independence. And that was the end of the first Aldmeri Dominion, a gradual splintering of various groups and factions having conflicting goals. But I said First Dominion, for the proud Altmer would not stand idly as the other races fought for their own gain. In 830th year of the Second Era, the current dynasty of Valenwood had a civil war over the right to the throne. One group made a deal with the Colovians to support their claim to the crown in exchange for lands of northern Valenwood. Altmer did not look favourably upon the encroaching border with Colovia. They have called on to ancient pacts and treaties between their kingdoms and pushed their own candidate onto the throne. While he ruled the Wood Elves, he was nothing more but a puppet controlled by the Thalmor, an Altmeri organization of purists and nationalists bent on neutralizing threats to their home archipelago. For the next 24 years, the High Elves would rule Valenwood from shadows. But one man, Tiber Septim, managed to unify the Colovians and the Nibbenese, allied with the Nords of Skyrim, and routed the Breton forces. He captured Hammerfell in War of Attrition, and his lands spread into the marshes of Argonia. He quelled uprising after uprising as the Khajiit resisted his conquest, and he signed peace treaty with the Tribunal of Morrowind. Then he turned his gaze to Valenwood. The Altmer were desperate to maintain their sovereignty, and they allied not only with the remaining Bosmerian Khajiit troops, but also with their ancient enemy, the Maormer. The proud elves would not forfeit their way of life so easily, but they could not be prepared for Tiber Septim's war machine, the Numidium. An enormous brass machine crafted by the long-gone Dwemer was the weapon of unparalleled destruction. The Altmer had no hope of defeating this foe, and after sustaining heavy losses, they reluctantly agreed to submit to the Empire. And with their downfall, the Tiber Wars come to an end, and the Third Era begins. Despite living under the rule of men, life for the Altmer remained as it was before. In the 110th year of the Third Era, the Maormer organized a mass attack on Summerset, and they nearly conquered it. Even though the High Elves received reinforcements from the Empire, the War of the Isle was not going well. In their darkest moment, the Sijic order came to their aid, summoning a powerful storm which scattered the Maormeri armada. After this brief but vicious conflict, the Altmer were mainly left alone, as they would prefer to be. But this would not last forever. In 433rd year of the Third Era, the Oblivion Crisis began, and while all provinces were scarred by this event, the Altmer suffered more than most. They don't even call it Oblivion Crisis. Instead, they refer to it as Great Anguish. The Dremora forces were heavily focused on solidifying their foothold on Mundus, and so they assaulted the Crystal Tower of Summerset. The forces of Mehrunes Dagon used both might and magic to topple the majestic structure, deeply scarring the elves. For them, this ancient monument was a symbol of their heritage and excellence. The Great Anguish would bring the end of the Septim Dynasty, Third Era, but also the Empire as we know it. The Empire lacked a strong leader to rally the masses to rebuild, and many provinces viewed Empire as weak, as they could not protect them during the crisis, and so they desired independence. An anti-empire sentiment was prominent in Summerset Isles for centuries after Tiber Septim terrorized them with dominion. But after the crisis, the elves were ready to succeed, even at the cost of war. Thalmor gained a lot of popularity among the Altmers, as they advocated elven supremacy, calling out men as incompetent to lead. Already working in the shadows for entirety of Second Era, Thalmor began sowing seeds of chaos throughout Tamriel, further weakening the Empire and setting the stage for their plan. 22 years into Fourth Era, Thalmor seized power in Summerset, abolishing the monarchy that has ruled them for thousands of years. With the Isles in their grasp, they set their sights on the ancient allies of Altmer, the Wood Elves. 7 years later, in 29th year of Fourth Era, they stage a coup in Valinesti, gaining control of the province and forming the Third Aldmeri Dominion. Having routed imperial forces from Valenwood, Thalmor closed the borders and refused any exchange with the Empire. The following is a complete speculation because of the lack of information on events in the Blessed Isles, but it makes sense that Thalmor would want to reinforce its position by purging any Altmer who do not share in their extremist worldview. This caused dissidents to flee Somerset, seeking to make life elsewhere. However, Thalmor were not so keen on letting them go, as they knew too much. Many of them fled to Hammerfell, and by 42nd year of Fourth Era, Altmer folks had their own part of the capital city. The refugees who made their way to Sentinel were attacked by Thalmor agents, killed, for who does not stand with Thalmor is against them. The locals later named this massacre a Night of Green Fire because of the Altmer preference for destruction magic. Insidious as they are, the Thalmor are main suspects in the assassination of the Main, a spiritual leader of the Khajiit. This causes Elsewhere to descend into turmoil as the province breaks in half, reverting to their ancient divide between Anaquina and Palatine. The strife of catfolk makes the Empire lose what little hold they held on them, laying foundation for the inclusion of the Khajiit in the Dominion. The years 98 and 99 brought a great calamity to the catfolk. The moons, Maser and Secunda, vanished, disappeared. Now all Khajiit culture, religion, philosophy revolves around the moons, as the phase they are in dictate what breed the newborn Khajiit will be. Without the moons, all Khajiit infants were stillborn. 2 years of untold mourning and despair. Until, in the year 100, the moons inexplicably returned. Whether or not the Thalmor has caused their disappearance or brought about their return, we don't know. Regardless, the Thalmor claimed it was their deed that moons made a return, and relieved Khajiit praised them as their saviors. In show of gratitude, they submit themselves to the Dominion as a client state. At this point, the Empire is at its weakest. Hammerfell experiences civil war. The Dunmer are devastated by the cataclysmic eruption of Red Mountain. Argonians are taking revenge on their oppressors, while the Dominion is rallying its troops. The Thalmor, now bent on bringing Tamriel back under elven rule, invaded the Empire on 2 fronts in 171st year of Fourth Era. Lord Narfin led the army from Elsewhere, and Lady Aranelia rushed through Gold Coast into Hammerfell. Their forces cut the bloody swath across the land, razing villages and besieging the cities. 3 years later, Imperial City itself was breached and plundered. The Emperor, Titus II, survived the sacking and a year later returned with reinforcements. The Battle of Red Ring ended with his victory and recapture of Imperial City. The main elven forces were destroyed, while the men suffered tremendous losses, leaving both sides unable to continue the war. To bring an end to this conflict, the Emperor accepted the Altmeri demands and signed the White Gold Concordat. After 4 years, the Great War ended, and even though the Empire caved to the demands, the losses the elves have sustained have further fueled their hatred for mankind. In the aftermath of the war, The Thalmor has set its agents all across the Empire to ensure its compliance with the Concordat. These agents acted as Inquisition, and their aloofness and cruelty has earned them the disdain of almost every citizen. Even many Altmer living outside the Dominion do not speak favorably of the Thalmor. One of these agents was sent out to the College of Winterhold to scrutinize the mages studying there. In 201st year of 4th era, a member of the college has discovered a powerful artifact, Eye of Magnus. When the eye was transported to the college for examination, the Thalmor agent dropped the facade and, unable to resist the call of power, he lashed out onto all to gain control of the eye. In the struggle with the members of the college, he was killed, but the idea that any Thalmor agent feels allowed to take such drastic measures to pursue their goals is frightening. Will the Altmer grow tired of peace and instigate another war? Only time will tell, and unfortunately, the Altmer have a lot more time than we do.